You think you're in control of your decisions, don't you? You believe that when you choose a career, pick a partner, or spend your money, you're making rational choices based on careful thought. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You're not. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's a hidden system in your brain making decisions for you, and you don't even know it's happening. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist who dedicated his life to studying human judgment, discovered something that should terrify you. Most of your decisions aren't really yours. They're the result of mental shortcuts, emotional reactions, and cognitive traps that hijack your thinking without you ever noticing. Think about the last major decision you made. Maybe it was taking a job, ending a relationship, or making an investment. You felt certain, didn't you? You had reasons, logic, a clear sense that you were doing the right thing. But what if I told you that certainty was an illusion? What if the feeling of being right has almost nothing to do with actually being right? Kahneman's research revealed that your brain is constantly lying to you, creating false confidence, cherry-picking evidence, and making you believe that snap judgments are carefully reasoned conclusions. And the smarter you are, the better your brain is at deceiving you. Because intelligence doesn't protect you from these traps. It just makes you better at justifying bad decisions after you've already made them. Here's what's at stake. Every day, these hidden mental traps are costing you. Money you shouldn't have spent, opportunities you should have taken, relationships you should have left or fought harder to keep, beliefs you're holding onto that aren't actually true. You're walking through life thinking you're steering the ship, when really you're just along for the ride, letting unconscious patterns drive you toward outcomes you never consciously chose. But here's the thing. Once you understand how these traps work, once you can actually see them operating in real time, you can start making decisions that serve your actual goals instead of just satisfying your brain's lazy desire for comfort and consistency. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the specific ways your mind is sabotaging you right now. The anchoring effect that makes you overpay for everything. The loss aversion that keeps you stuck in situations that are slowly destroying you. The overconfidence that makes you underestimate risk, and the confirmation bias that turns you into a prisoner of your own perspective. More importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to break free from these patterns and start thinking clearly, maybe for the first time in your life. This isn't theory. This is immediately applicable knowledge that'll change how you see every decision you make from this point forward. But here's the deal. If you want to actually benefit from this, you need to watch all the way through, because these concepts build on each other. Missing one piece means you won't see the full picture of how your mind really works. And if this kind of deep, practical philosophy speaks to you, if you want more content that challenges how you think rather than just telling you what you want to hear, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps us create more videos like this. And it tells YouTube that this kind of intellectually honest content matters. Too many channels out there are just feeding you motivational garbage and surface-level self-help. We're here to give you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. All right, let's get into it. Here's something most people never realize. You've got two completely different minds operating inside your head right now. And they're not working together. They're competing. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, spent decades studying this internal battle, and what he discovered should make you question every decision you've ever made. He called them System 1 and System 2, but think of them more like this. One's a reactive, emotional teenager who acts on impulse, and the other's a rational adult who actually thinks things through. The problem? That impulsive teenager is running the show about 95% of the time, and you don't even know it. This isn't just some abstract theory. This is the hidden force shaping your career choices, your relationships, your finances, and pretty much everything else that matters in your life. System 1 is your autopilot. It's fast, automatic, and effortless. It's the part of your brain that instantly recognizes your friend's face in a crowd, feels disgust when you see spoiled food, or answers, "What's 2 plus 2?" without thinking. This system evolved over millions of years to keep our ancestors alive when split-second decisions meant the difference between eating dinner and becoming dinner. It works through pattern recognition and emotional responses, making snap judgments based on limited information. And here's the kicker. System 1 operates entirely beneath your conscious awareness. You can't turn it off, you can't reason with it, and most of the time, you can't even tell when it's influencing you. It's like having a co-pilot who keeps grabbing the controls without asking permission. Now, System 2 is the part of you that feels like you. It's deliberate, logical, and effortful. This is what kicks in when you're solving a complex math problem, comparing different job offers, or trying to understand a philosophical argument. System 2 can think about thinking, question assumptions, and work through difficult decisions step by step. Sound great, right? Here's the catch. System 2 is lazy as hell. It requires massive amounts of mental energy, and your brain treats that energy like a precious resource it doesn't want to waste. Think about the last time you had to fill out tax forms or read a dense legal document. That exhausted, mentally drained feeling? That's System 2 at work, and your brain hates it. So whenever possible, your mind will default to System 1's quick and dirty shortcuts, even when the situation demands careful analysis. The real trouble starts when System 1 makes a snap judgment, and System 2 just rubber stamps it without actually checking the work. You see an expensive watch in a store window, and System 1 instantly whispers, "That'll make you look successful." System 2 should step in and ask, "Wait, do I actually need this? Can I afford it? Is this the best use of my money?" But instead, System 2 just manufactures rational-sounding excuses to justify what System 1 already decided emotionally. Before you know it, you've dropped $3,000 on a watch you'll wear twice. This happens in bigger decisions too. Choosing a career because it sounds impressive, staying in a toxic relationship because you've already invested so much time, believing something's true just because it feels right. Your brain is constantly running this bait-and-switch operation, and most people go their entire lives without catching on. But here's where it gets even more insidious. Your brain is burning roughly 20% of your body's total energy right now, even though it only makes up about 2% of your body weight. That's an insane metabolic cost, and evolution doesn't waste resources like that without good reason. But here's the problem that Kahneman identified. Your brain is also incredibly stingy about how it spends that energy. Think of it like a smartphone trying to preserve battery life. It'll dim the screen, close background apps, and switch to low-power mode whenever possible. Your brain does the exact same thing with cognitive effort, and that's where mental shortcuts, what psychologists call heuristics, come into play. These shortcuts aren't inherently bad. They helped our ancestors survive when quick decisions mattered more than perfect decisions. But in the modern world, where the stakes are different and the problems are more complex, these same shortcuts are quietly sabotaging your life. Let's say you're scrolling through your phone and you see a headline that confirms what you already believe about politics, health, or success. System 1 processes that headline in milliseconds and decides, "Yep, that sounds right," based purely on whether it matches your existing beliefs. System 2 should jump in and ask critical questions. Who wrote this? What's their agenda? What evidence supports this claim? But that takes effort. Real, uncomfortable, energy-draining effort. So instead, System 2 takes a nap, and you scroll past feeling more certain than ever that you're right. Now multiply that by hundreds of decisions every single day. What to eat, who to trust, what to believe, where to invest your time and money. You're essentially running your life on autopilot, letting cognitive biases pile up like interest on a credit card you never check. The debt compounds silently until one day you wake up wondering how you ended up in a career you hate, or a relationship that doesn't fulfill you, or believing things that aren't actually true. Kahneman found that even highly intelligent people fall into this trap constantly. In fact, sometimes intelligence makes it worse because smart people are better at rationalizing their System 1 impulses after the fact. You've probably seen this yourself. The brilliant friend who makes terrible romantic choices, the successful executive who can't quit smoking, the PhD who believes conspiracy theories. Intelligence doesn't protect you from cognitive biases. If anything, it gives you more sophisticated tools to deceive yourself. Your brain doesn't want truth. It wants efficiency, consistency, and the path of least resistance. It wants to conserve energy for actual emergencies, not waste it on careful deliberation about everyday decisions. So it develops these elegant little workarounds, these mental shortcuts that feel like careful thinking, but are really just System 1 wearing a System 2 costume. The scary part is how invisible this process is from the inside. When you make a decision, it feels rational. It feels like you weighed the options, considered the evidence, and came to a logical conclusion. But what actually happened is that System 1 delivered an instant verdict based on emotion, pattern recognition, and whatever information was most easily available in your memory. And then System 2 constructed a story to make that verdict sound reasonable. You're not thinking, you're storytelling. You're not reasoning, you're justifying. And the better you are at constructing these post hoc explanations, the more confident you feel in decisions that might be completely wrong. It's like driving a car where the steering wheel isn't actually connected to the wheels, but you don't know it because the scenery keeps changing in ways that feel somewhat plausible. Now, here's where it gets even more dangerous. Imagine you walk into a negotiation and the other person throws out a number first. Let's say they're selling a used car for $15,000. Even if that price is completely arbitrary, even if they pulled it out of thin air, that number just became an anchor that'll drag down every calculation you make from that point forward. Kahneman's research showed that anchoring is one of the most powerful and persistent cognitive biases we face, and it works even when we know we're being manipulated. In one famous experiment, researchers asked people to estimate what percentage of African nations were in the United Nations. But first, they spun a wheel that randomly landed on either 10 or 65. People who saw 10 guessed an average of 25%. People who saw 65 guessed an average of 45%. A completely irrelevant random number influenced educated adults' estimates about geography and international relations. Think about that for a second. If a rigged wheel can hijack your judgment about facts, what's happening when you're dealing with first impressions, initial offers, or opening statements in situations that actually matter? This is happening to you constantly, and you probably don't even notice. When you see a shirt marked down from $200 to $80, you're not evaluating whether the shirt is worth $80. You're comparing $80 to the anchor of $200 and thinking you're getting a steal, even though the original price might have been completely inflated to create that exact feeling. When a real estate agent shows you 3 overpriced houses before showing you the one they actually want to sell, they're deliberately setting an anchor to make that 4th house seem reasonable by comparison. When a job interviewer asks about your current salary before discussing the new position's pay, they're anchoring the negotiation to your past rather than your future value. And here's the really insidious part. Even when you're aware of the anchoring effect, even when you consciously try to adjust for it, research shows you probably won't adjust enough. The anchor keeps pulling at your judgment like a gravitational force you can see but can't escape. The reason anchoring works so effectively comes back to that lazy System 2 we talked about earlier. When you need to make a numerical estimate or judgment, System 2 should start from scratch, carefully considering all relevant information. But that's exhausting, so instead it uses whatever number is already sitting in your working memory as a starting point and then makes small adjustments from there. It's like trying to navigate using a map where someone else already marked an X. Even if that X is wrong, you'll probably end up searching somewhere near it rather than checking the entire map from scratch. Your brain treats the anchor as valuable information, even when it knows the anchor is meaningless. And this doesn't just apply to numbers. It applies to impressions, judgments, and evaluations of all kinds. The first thing you learn about a person, a product, or an opportunity colors everything you learn afterward. Think about job interviews, first dates, or meeting new people at a party. Those first 30 seconds create an anchor that's incredibly difficult to shift, even with contradictory evidence. If someone starts off seeming confident and articulate, You'll interpret their later stumbles as nervousness or quirks. If they start off seeming awkward, you'll interpret those same behaviors as incompetence or social deficiency. The content is identical, but the anchor frames everything. This is why con artists are so good at first impressions. They know that if they can nail those first few minutes, they've basically hijacked your judgment system for everything that follows. And it's not just about being deceived by others. You're doing this to yourself all the time. The first article you read about a topic, the first opinion you hear, the first number you see, these become anchors that make it harder to think clearly about everything that comes next. But anchoring is just one trap in a minefield of cognitive distortions. Here's a simple question that reveals something profound about how your mind works. Would you take a bet where you flip a coin, and if it's heads, you win $150, but if it's tails, you lose $100? Most people say no, even though mathematically this is a fantastic bet with positive expected value. Kahneman discovered that losses hurt roughly twice as much as equivalent gains feel good, a principle he called loss aversion. You're not just risk averse. You're specifically terrified of losing what you already have, even when the potential gain clearly outweighs the potential loss. This isn't rational calculation. It's an emotional overreaction baked into your neural architecture. And this fear of loss is quietly running huge portions of your life, keeping you stuck in situations that no longer serve you, preventing you from taking chances that could transform everything, making you cling to the familiar, even when the familiar is slowly killing your potential. Think about the job you hate but won't quit, the relationship that stopped working years ago, the investment that's tanking but you can't bring yourself to sell. Loss aversion explains why people stay in miserable situations far longer than makes any logical sense. You're not weighing the current situation against better alternatives. You're weighing it against the pain of admitting you were wrong, the loss of time and energy you've already invested, the fear of what you'll lose by leaving. Economists call this the sunk cost fallacy, but it's really just loss aversion wearing a different mask. You've already spent 3 years in grad school for a field you've realized you don't actually like. The rational move is to cut your losses and switch directions. But loss aversion screams, you can't waste those 3 years, so you spend 3 more years, then 10, then your entire career, all to avoid admitting that the initial investment was a mistake. You're not protecting what you have. You're protecting yourself from the feeling of having lost something, even when holding on guarantees a bigger loss in the long run. Kahneman's research showed this pattern across every domain of human decision-making. Investors hold losing stocks too long and sell winning stocks too early. Gamblers keep betting to recover losses, digging themselves deeper. People stay in toxic situations because, at least I know what I'm dealing with here. The fear of loss makes you conservative when you should be bold and reckless when you should be cautious. It gets even worse when you consider opportunity cost, all the things you're not gaining because you're so focused on not losing. While you're clinging to that dead-end job, you're losing years of growth and a better career. While you're staying in that stagnant relationship, you're losing the opportunity to find someone who actually fits. While you're holding on to beliefs that no longer serve you, you're losing the chance to see the world more clearly. Loss aversion doesn't just make you afraid of losses. It blinds you to what you're sacrificing by playing defense all the time. Here's the really messed up part. Marketers, salespeople, and manipulators understand loss aversion way better than you do, and they're using it against you constantly. Limited time offer. Only 3 left in stock. Don't miss out. These aren't just random phrases. They're precision engineered to trigger your loss aversion. You weren't even thinking about buying that product 5 minutes ago, but now you're scared you'll lose the opportunity, so you impulse buy something you don't need. Politicians use it too. They're going to take away your freedom, your rights, your way of life. Whether it's true or not almost doesn't matter. The threat of loss activates your system, one emotional response, so strongly that system 2 barely gets a vote. You make decisions based on fear of losing rather than hope of gaining, which means you're being controlled by the threat of pain rather than guided by the possibility of growth. And that fear, that overreaction to potential losses, is just one piece of a bigger puzzle. Ask yourself this: are you a better driver than average? If you said yes, congratulations. You're part of the 93% of people who think they're above average drivers, which is mathematically impossible. Kahneman spent years documenting this phenomenon. People consistently overestimate their knowledge, abilities, and judgment. And it's not just about driving, it's about everything. Investors think they can predict the market. Doctors overestimate their diagnostic accuracy. Students think they'll finish projects faster than they actually will. You think you understand complex issues better than you really do, and you're way more certain about your beliefs than the evidence actually justifies. This overconfidence isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. It makes you underestimate risks, ignore contradictory information, and double down on bad decisions because you're so sure you're right. System 1 delivers its judgments with complete confidence, even when it's working with incomplete information or pure guesses. And System 2 just accepts that confidence at face value. Here's a classic experiment that demonstrates this perfectly. Researchers ask people to answer questions like, "What year did George Washington become president?" and then rate their confidence in each answer on a scale from 50% to 100% certain. When people say they're 100% confident, they're wrong about 20% of the time. When they say 90% confident, they're wrong 30 to 40% of the time. Your subjective feeling of certainty has almost no relationship to actual accuracy. You feel confident because your brain has constructed a coherent story from the information available, not because the story is actually true. It's like watching a magic trick and feeling certain you know how it's done. That feeling of knowing is generated by your mind's pattern matching system, not by actual knowledge. And the less you actually know about something, the more confident you tend to feel because you don't know enough to recognize how much you don't know. Experts who've spent decades studying a field tend to be much more cautious in their claims than amateurs who just read a few articles, because the experts have actually encountered the complexity and ambiguity that the amateurs don't even know exists. This overconfidence shows up in a particularly toxic way when it comes to predicting the future. Kahneman worked with another researcher, Philip Tetlock, who studied political and economic experts making predictions about world events. The results were humbling. Expert predictions were barely more accurate than random chance, and in some cases were actually worse than simple statistical models. But here's the kicker. The more famous the expert, the more media appearances they made, the worse their predictions tended to be. Why? Because confidence makes for good television, and nuance makes for boring interviews. So the people who were most certain, most emphatic, and most willing to make bold predictions were also the most wrong. But they got the most airtime, the biggest platforms, the most influence. And this creates a culture where confidence is rewarded regardless of accuracy, where certainty is valued over careful reasoning, where people who say, "I don't know," or "it's complicated," get ignored in favor of people who spin simple, confident narratives that feel true even when they're not. You're probably doing this in your own life right now without realizing it. You're confident about why your relationship failed, even though you're mostly guessing at the other person's motivations. You're sure you know which career path will make you happy, even though you can't actually predict your future emotional states. You're certain about political positions, economic theories, or historical interpretations based on whatever information happened to be available and memorable, not based on a comprehensive understanding of the evidence. And when reality contradicts your confident predictions, you don't update your confidence level. You just rewrite the story to make it seem like you were basically right all along, or you blame external factors, or you conveniently forget you ever made that prediction in the first place. Your brain is constantly protecting your self-image as someone who knows what they're talking about, even when the evidence clearly shows you don't. But overconfidence is just the beginning of how you sabotage your own understanding. You know what's more comfortable than being right? Feeling right. And your brain will move heaven and earth to preserve that feeling, even if it means ignoring reality. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms what you already believe. You don't evaluate evidence objectively and then form conclusions. You form conclusions first, usually instantly, courtesy of System 1, and then selectively gather evidence to support them. It's like being the detective, the prosecutor, and the judge in your own mental courtroom, and you've already decided on the verdict before the trial even starts. Kahneman showed that smart people are actually more susceptible to this bias in some ways, because they're better at constructing sophisticated arguments to justify their pre-existing beliefs. You're not using your intelligence to find truth. You're using it to defend your current position, no matter how flimsy the foundation. Here's how it plays out in real life. Let's say you believe that working long hours is the key to success. Every time you see someone successful who works 80-hour weeks, System 1 lights up with satisfaction. See, I knew it. You remember those examples vividly. Share them with others. Use them as evidence for your worldview. But what about all the successful people who work reasonable hours? What about the correlation between burnout and decreased productivity? What about people who worked themselves into the ground and failed anyway? That evidence doesn't get the same attention. System 1 doesn't flag it as important because it doesn't match the pattern you're looking for. And System 2 is too lazy to go searching for contradictory information on its own. So you end up with a completely skewed data set that reinforces what you already believed, and you feel more confident than ever, even though you've basically just been cherry-picking evidence to support a conclusion you never really tested. This gets particularly nasty in the age of social media and algorithmic content curation. You click on articles that confirm your political views, so the algorithm shows you more of those articles. You follow people who think like you, so your feed becomes an echo chamber. You dismiss opposing viewpoints as biased or stupid, so you never seriously engage with them. Before long, you're living in a completely different information universe than someone with different beliefs, and both of you are absolutely certain you're right because all the evidence you see supports your position. Kahneman would say, this is System 1 running wild with no System 2 oversight whatsoever. You're not thinking critically. You're just consuming validation. And the scariest part is that the more intelligent and educated you are, the better you'll be at finding sophisticated-sounding reasons why your side is right and the other side is wrong. You'll find that one study that supports your view while ignoring the 10 that contradict it. You'll spot every logical flaw in arguments you disagree with while giving your own side a free pass on similar errors. The truly dangerous thing about confirmation bias is that it makes you intellectually fragile while making you feel intellectually invincible. You've never actually tested your beliefs against serious opposition, but you think you have because you've spent years consuming friendly fire. You've never honestly asked, what if I'm wrong about this? Because that question feels like betraying yourself. You've mistaken being immersed in your own perspective for having investigated the issue thoroughly. And when someone does present genuinely challenging evidence, your first instinct isn't curiosity, it's defense. System 1 interprets disagreement as attack, conflicting evidence as threat, and your own potential wrongness as something to be avoided at all costs. So instead of updating your beliefs based on new information like a rational person should, you double down, dig in, and find new ways to dismiss anything that threatens your current worldview. You're not seeking truth, you're seeking comfort. And that comfort is costing you more than you realize, because there's actually a way out of these traps. All right, here's the good news. Just because your brain is hardwired with these cognitive biases doesn't mean you're doomed to be their prisoner forever. Kahneman himself was clear about this. Awareness is the first step toward mitigation, not elimination. You'll never completely escape these mental traps because they're built into the architecture of your mind, but you can develop systems and habits that catch them before they wreck your decisions. Think of it like this. You can't change the fact that you feel hungry, tired, or attracted to certain things, but you can build your environment and routines to work with those feelings rather than being controlled by them. The same goes for cognitive biases. System 1 isn't going away, but you can train System 2 to wake up and do its job more often. You can create external structures that force better thinking when your internal processes fail. You can become the kind of person who spots their own BS before it costs them. The first practical strategy is what Kahneman called slow thinking, deliberately forcing yourself to engage System 2 before making important decisions. This sounds obvious, but most people skip this step because it feels unnecessary. You feel like you already know what to do, so why waste energy questioning it? Here's the rule. Whenever a decision matters, and I mean actually matters for your life, your finances, your relationships, your career, force yourself to sleep on it. Not because sleeping magically improves your judgment, but because time creates distance from System 1's instant emotional reaction. Write down your initial impulse and the reasons for it. Then walk away for at least 24 hours. When you come back, ask yourself, if I was advising my best friend about this decision, what would I tell them? This little mental trick activates System 2 because you're suddenly evaluating the situation from outside your own ego and emotional investment. You'd never tell your friend to stay in that toxic job just because they've already invested 3 years. You'd never tell them to buy that overpriced car just because it made them feel successful for 30 seconds. But you'll absolutely do these things to yourself if you don't create space between impulse and action. Second strategy, actively seek out information that contradicts what you believe and take it seriously. This is incredibly uncomfortable, which is exactly why most people don't do it. But here's a specific way to make it work. Whenever you're researching a decision or forming an opinion, force yourself to read the strongest arguments from the opposing perspective, not the weak strawman versions that make you feel smart, but the actual best case made by intelligent people who disagree with you. If you're considering a career change, don't just read success stories. Read about people who made similar changes and regretted it. If you're evaluating an investment, don't just look at bullish analyses. Find the most credible bearish take you can and really wrestle with it. This isn't about becoming paralyzed by indecision. It's about testing your reasoning against actual challenges rather than imaginary ones. Kahneman called this pre-mortem. Before you commit to a decision, imagine it's failed spectacularly and work backward to figure out what went wrong. This exercise activates critical thinking that you completely skip when you're just confirming what you already want to do. Third, build in external checks on your thinking. Use checklists for important decisions, because checklists force you to consider factors that System 1 wants to ignore. Keep a decision journal where you write down major choices, your reasoning, and your predictions about outcomes. Then review it 6 months or a year later to see where you were wrong. This is painful, but incredibly valuable because it shows you the specific patterns in your bad judgment. Get a trusted friend or mentor who's willing to challenge you honestly and actually listen when they point out your blind spots instead of getting defensive. Use rules and systems to automate good decisions so you're not relying on willpower and judgment in the moment. Things like automatic savings, predetermined criteria for evaluating opportunities, or clear principles you've committed to in advance. The goal is to set up your environment so that doing the smart thing is easier than doing the dumb thing. Because here's the truth Kahneman discovered. You're not going to win by trying to think better in the moment. System 1 is faster and stronger than System 2, and it'll win most direct confrontations. But you can win by changing the game, by creating conditions where your brain's natural tendencies work for you instead of against you, where the path of least resistance actually leads somewhere good. Your mind is both the problem and the solution, but only if you're willing to admit you need one. So now you know. Your brain has been running this elaborate con on you your whole life. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? Because here's what separates people who actually grow from people who just consume content and forget about tomorrow. Action. You can watch this video, nod along, think, yeah, that makes sense, and then go right back to letting System 1 run your life on autopilot. Or you can actually catch yourself the next time you feel that instant certainty, that comfortable confirmation of what you already believed, that fear of loss overwhelming your logic. And you can pause. You can ask yourself, is this real thinking, or is this just my brain taking shortcuts? The traps Kahneman identified aren't going away. Anchoring, loss aversion, overconfidence, confirmation bias. They're hardwired into your neural architecture. But now you've got something most people never get: awareness. You can see the strings. You can spot when you're being manipulated, including when you're manipulating yourself. That awareness is worthless if you don't use it, but it's priceless if you do. Start small. Question one decision this week that feels obvious. Write down your reasoning before you commit. Sleep on something that System 1 wants you to do right now. Seek out one piece of information that challenges what you think you know. These aren't grand gestures. They're the daily practice of thinking like someone who actually wants truth over comfort. Here's my challenge to you. If this video gave you even one insight that made you see your own thinking differently, hit that like button. Seriously, it takes half a second, and it makes a massive difference in helping this content reach people who actually want to think clearly instead of just being validated. And if you want more of this, more philosophy that connects to real life, more psychology that actually helps you make better decisions, more content that treats you like an intelligent adult instead of feeding you empty motivation, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We're building something different here, and we need people like you who are willing to challenge themselves rather than just seek confirmation. The real question Kahneman leaves us with isn't whether you're biased. You are, we all are. The question is whether you're going to do anything about it. Most people won't. They'll keep making the same cognitive errors, keep falling into the same mental traps, keep wondering why their decisions don't lead to the outcomes they want. But you're not most people, or you wouldn't have watched this far. So prove it. Not to me, but to yourself. Make one decision differently this week because of what you learned here. Notice one bias operating in real time. Catch yourself doing the thing we talked about and consciously choose to do something else. That's how you actually change. That's how you start thinking instead of just reacting. Now go use this, and I'll see you in the next one.